The fluorescent lights of Northwood High's library hummed with a frequency that matched the migraine blooming behind Elara Vance's eyes. Elara was a neat student. Her notes were color-coded, her pencils were sharpened to lethal points, and her GPA was a consistent 3.9. That 0.1 difference, the gap between her and academic perfection, had a name: Julian Thorne. Julian was the kind of guy who didn't just win, he made sure you knew you'd lost. He was the school's golden boy, the undisputed topper, and possessed an arrogance so thick you could carve your name in it. He didn't study, he absorbed. He didn't participate, he graced the room with his insights. And now, thanks to a disastrous chemistry lab explosion that wasn't even her fault, okay, it was 10% her fault, Elara was tethered to him. "You're late, Vance," Julian said without looking up from his sleek, silver laptop. He was sitting in her favorite corner booth, looking offensively handsome in a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than her car. "It's 4:01, Julian. I'm 60 seconds behind." "The world hasn't ended," Elara snapped, dropping her heavy backpack onto the mahogany table with a satisfying thud. "In 60 seconds, the Earth travels 30 kilometers through space," Julian remarked, finally meeting her gaze with eyes the color of a brewing storm. "That's a lot of wasted momentum. If you're so brilliant, why did the dean mandate these sessions?" Elara retorted, pulling out her copy of Advanced Organic Chemistry. Julian's smirk faltered, just for a millisecond. "Community service hours. Apparently, socializing with the commoners looks good on Ivy League applications. And you, Elara, are the most common person I know." Elara felt the familiar heat of indignation. He was insufferable. He spent the next 2 hours correcting her pronunciation of Latin derivatives and sighing loudly whenever she took more than 3 seconds to solve a mechanism. He was a human paper cut, small, stinging, and incredibly annoying. For 3 weeks, this was their ritual, verbal sparring disguised as tutoring. Elara hated his confidence, his perfect hair, and the way he looked at her like she was a particularly confusing math problem. But then came the Tuesday of the Great Humiliation. It happened in the cafeteria, the apex of Northwood's social hierarchy. Elara was sitting with her only friend Maya, trying to ignore the whispers. Lately, a group of girls led by Chloe, the school's self-appointed queen bee, had taken a keen interest in mocking Elara's charity work with Julian. "Oh look," Chloe's voice carried across the room. "It's the tutor. Tell me, Elara, does Julian pay you in cash, or does he just let you breathe the same air as him for free?" The table erupted in laughter. Elara kept her head down, her fingers trembling against her juice box. "I heard she actually writes his essays for him," Chloe continued, stepping closer. "Because there's no way someone like Julian would spend time with a girl who wears, what is that? Target clearance." Chloe reached out, intending to flick a stray thread on Elara's sweater, but her hand accidentally, or perhaps very intentionally, caught the edge of Elara's open tray. A pint of chocolate milk and a bowl of lukewarm chili erupted. It splattered across Elara's white blouse, soaking through the fabric. The cafeteria went silent for a heartbeat before the snickering began. Elara felt the sting of tears. It wasn't just the mess, it was the sheer public smallness of the moment. "Oops," Chloe giggled, not looking sorry at all. "My hand slipped." Elara stood up, her chair screeching against the linoleum. She felt every eye in the room on her. She felt like a caricature of the nerdy girl in a bad movie. "That was unnecessary," a cold, calm voice rang out. The crowd parted. Julian Thorne was standing there, his hands in his pockets. He didn't look angry, he looked bored, which was somehow more terrifying. "Julian," Chloe chirped, her face transforming into a mask of sweetness. "She just tripped. I was trying to help." "I was standing right behind you, Chloe," Julian said. He walked forward, stepping over a puddle of chili without breaking eye contact. "Your aim was impeccable. Your acting? Not so much." "It's just a joke," Chloe stammered. "A joke is something funny," Julian replied, stopping inches from Elara. He didn't look at the mess. He looked at her. "Bullying is just a lack of personality masquerading as power. You should work on that. It's a bad look for a senior." He then did something no one expected. He took off his expensive charcoal sweater, leaving him in a plain white t-shirt, and handed it to Elara. "Put it on," he commanded softly. "Julian Vance. For once, stop arguing and do what I say." Elara took the sweater. It smelled like expensive cologne and sandalwood. It was warm. As she pulled it over her head, shielding her ruined clothes, Julian turned back to the room. "If anyone else has a joke they'd like to share, I'm all ears," he announced. No one said a word. The golden boy had spoken and his word was law. He turned to Elara, grabbed her bag and nodded toward the exit. "Let's go. We have work to do." They didn't go to the library. Julian drove her to a small, quiet park by the river in his pristine black SUV. "Why are we here?" Elara asked, clutching his oversized sweater around her. "You were shaking," he said, staring at the steering wheel. "The library is full of people. People are exhausting." "Since when do you care about being exhausted by people?" "You're the king of Northwood," Elara muttered, though the bite was gone from her voice. Julian sighed, a sound that seemed to deflate his usual posture. "It's a performance, Elara. My parents expect a certain image. The school expects a certain image. If I'm not the smartest, the coolest, and the most untouchable, I'm just a kid with too much pressure and a very lonely house." Elara looked at him. For the first time, she didn't see the topper. She saw a boy who worked until 2 a.m. every night because he was terrified of a 98%. "You don't have to be a jerk to maintain that image, you know," she said softly. Julian leaned his head back against the headrest. "I know. It's a defense mechanism. If I'm the one looking down on everyone else, they can't look down on me." He paused, then glanced at her. "I'm sorry. For everything. Especially for the commoner comment." "It was a pretty good insult," Elara admitted, a small smile playing on her lips. "It was terrible. You're the most uncommon person I've ever met." The air in the car changed. It wasn't the sharp, competitive tension of the library. It was something softer, like the glow of the dashboard lights. Julian reached out, his hand hovering near hers for a second before he pulled back, clearing his throat. "Anyway, we still need to cover the Krebs cycle. Don't think a little chili gets you out of your tutoring duties." The following 2 weeks were different. The insults turned into playful banter. The tutoring sessions became hours of talking about music, dreams, and the fear of the future. Elara realized Julian wasn't just smart, he was curious. He loved the way the stars looked through a telescope because they made his problems feel small. He liked old jazz because it felt honest. And Elara? Elara realized she was in trouble. She was falling for the boy she'd spent 3 years hating. Every time he pushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear or laughed at one of her nerdy jokes, her heart did a frantic little dance. But she kept it hidden. He was Julian Thorne. He was headed for Harvard. She was Elara Vance, the girl who still had a chocolate milk stain on her favorite shirt. Then came Friday. The final exam results were posted. For the first time in Northwood history, there was a tie for the top spot. Julian Thorne and Elara Vance. Monday morning, the atmosphere at school was electric. The tie was all anyone could talk about. Elara walked down the hallway, her head held high, feeling a strange sense of peace. She didn't need to beat Julian anymore. She just wanted to be near him. She entered her AP literature class. The room was buzzing. Julian was already there, sitting in the back, surrounded by his usual crowd. But as soon as Elara walked in, he stood up. The room went quiet. Chloe, sitting in the front row, smirked. "Ready for the tiebreaker, Elara? Or are you going to cry again?" Julian didn't look at Chloe. He walked toward the front of the classroom, stopping right in front of Elara's desk. In his hand, he held a single, perfectly red rose. "Julian?" Elara whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I spend a lot of time thinking about that tie," Julian said. His voice was steady, but Elara could see the slight tremor in his fingers. He wasn't the golden boy right now. He was just a boy. The entire class was leaning in. Cell phones were being pulled out. "I realized," Julian continued, "that being at the top is actually pretty boring. Unless you're there with someone who challenges you. Someone who makes you want to be a better version of yourself instead of just a louder version." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her desk. "Elara Vance, you are the most brilliant, infuriating, and incredible person I have ever had the privilege of knowing. I don't want to compete with you anymore." He held out the rose. "I've spent 3 years being the topper. I'd like to spend my last year being your boyfriend. If you'll have me, will you go out with me?" The silence was deafening. You could hear a pin drop on the industrial carpet. Chloe's jaw was practically on the floor. Elara looked at the rose, then up at Julian. She saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the same vulnerability she'd seen in the car by the river. She didn't care about the cameras. She didn't care about the hierarchy. She reached out and took the rose. On one condition, she said, her voice clear. Julian breathed a laugh, his relief visible. What's that? You have to let me win at chess tonight. No absorbing the board. Julian smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Not a chance, Vance. You're going to have to earn it. The classroom erupted into cheers. Even the teacher, Mr. Harrison, was hiding a smile behind his copy of The Great Gatsby. Julian reached out and took Elara's hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. No words were needed. The girl who loved to study and the boy who was tired of being perfect had finally found something that didn't require a grade. It was better than a 4.0. It was real.